So it's that time once again where we take you through the morning papers. Here with me today are the anthropologist Marianne Hotter and the broadcaster Pete Price. So welcome back to both of you, and good to see you've changed your top. I love your mixture, Pete. Don't think it doesn't go unnoticed. You have to watch every hour just to see the full range. I love the wellies, very in keeping with the weather. Anyway, let's crack on, shall we? Pete, we're actually starting with a very serious story, aren't we? And this is something that you spotted inside The Observer. This is, the headline says it all. GPs tell patients to get an Uber as ambulance delays hit record levels.
Yeah, this is really quite controversial. I've got to be honest, if somebody was ill in my home, I would just put them straight in the car unless they're not being able to be moved. So it is interesting that they're saying this. What doctors are saying, one doctor has actually said that if somebody's not having a heart attack or a
I'm pausing. Pete, your line froze for a second there. You were just saying that one doctor was saying, and then you froze for a moment. So just pick up where you left off. Apologies for that, and hopefully the line will hold.
One doctor said if they're not having a heart attack or a stroke, then they should be driven in a car, or an Uber or a friend take them up there. So it's quite a controversial idea of getting a taxi. But another doctor said one patient was told an 18-hour wait. And of course the big problem is, and we were talking about it in the first hour with the other papers, the big problem is the handover of the ambulances at the hospitals, because there's no beds there, and a lot of people are in the beds waiting to go home, and also there's a lot of people that can't go to nursing homes. So it is a major problem, but this is really controversial. But I've got to be honest, if it was me, I would just put one of my friends in a car and drive straight to the hospital.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess, Marianne, not everyone has that option if they don't have a car, for example, and they want the expertise of the amazing ambulance crews to kind of assess things at your home before they get to hospital.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I have very personal experience of this. Just about a month ago, my son, my youngest son, who's just turned 1, was having breathing difficulties. I managed to get a GP appointment, and at the GP's appointment, he started to deteriorate. They were absolutely phenomenal. So shout out to Burville House in Hatfield. They provided oxygen. There was a nurse who stayed with us, and they called an ambulance. And the doctor came in and said, the ambulance says that it's not too long to wait. It'll only be about 15 minutes. And the following week, we ended up back in hospital with my son, and one of the people who'd made it into the A&E waiting room had been told that there was an 8-hour wait for an ambulance because it was a Friday night. And on the time that we had this ambulance take us to hospital, my son deteriorated even further in the paramedic ambulance and was very close to respiratory arrest. And I thought to myself, I was a hair's breadth away from going, I'll rush home, I'll put him in the car, and I'll take him up to A&E myself. And honestly, if I'd had to do that, because when the doctors had called, there was an 8-hour wait for a 999 ambulance, I think my son would be dead, because he got all the medication in that 15-minute rush to hospital. He had 2 paramedics working on him, and thankfully he was okay. Wow. But, you know, but for the grace of God, if you believe in God.
Yeah, well, gosh, what a traumatic thing to go through. I'm so glad your son's okay. But, yeah, really tough, really tough. I'm so glad it worked out well. Marianne, are you happy to talk about net zero? Shall I move back to Pete? Obviously, quite emotional, understandably, kind of recalling all of that.
I know, it's the thing, because I was so grateful for the treatment and the care. Oh, sorry.
No, it's understandable.
But it's just that thing where you think, it could have been so different, and for so many people, it is different. You know, I've been on a paper review previously and read a story about a mum whose child, she woke up in the night and the baby wasn't breathing, and they waited for an ambulance, and the ambulance didn't come, and the baby died. And I thought, I can't actually cover that story because I'll just be a mess.
Yeah.
And it's so terrible. It's not just babies, it's people of all ages. And the thing is, if you're having a stroke or if someone's choking or all those things, if the ambulance isn't coming, then you're on your own. It's terrifying.
Absolutely. And appreciate you sharing that with us, Marianne. I'm going to talk about Christmas lights, because it's affecting, everyone's got their own experiences as well, aren't they? It's very affecting for everybody. Pete, let's turn, shall we, to the Mirror. I mean, it's not altogether good news, but just the words festive lights can cheer us up a little bit. But what's the story actually about here?
Well, I need to know, because she's just upset me now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the lights. Oxford Street, they're going to have the lights on from 3 o'clock till 11 o'clock in the evening. They're cutting down for Christmas because of the energy crisis that we've got. And also, it's happening all over the world in different cities with the council lightings, etc., which I think is not a bad thing at all. You know, I hate white work. I work nights, and when I come home, I see buildings lit up, and I just don't understand why buildings are always lit up. It's ridiculous. But for anyone listening out there, it's certainly not affecting the private homes. I went for a walk the other day. It's only the 27th of November, and there's lights everywhere. There's Christmas trees hanging off the roofs and the light. I thought people had no money. Am I missing something here?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there is some particular house. I remember one route I used to have on the way back from work that was lit up, and it just brought me joy, I have to say. There were kind of sleighs and reindeer and Father Christmases. But you're right, it's something that people will have to think twice about, given the cost of energy now, I guess. Talking of energy, let's move on to net zero, shall we, Marianne? This was a story that you'd wanted to talk about in the Telegraph, and suggesting that polling pointing towards people perhaps wanting a referendum on the subject.
So this is a survey that had been commissioned by YouGov by should we say, a net zero skeptic group called CAR26. And although the findings should be relatively independent, 44% of people polled in Britain want a referendum on whether the UK's net zero commitment, so achieving net zero by 2050, things like not having new petrol or diesel cars by 2030, no new gas boilers in new homes by 2025, which is very soon, things like that. Should there be a referendum on these policies, on these regulations that will come into law? They're currently legally binding, that will help us reduce our carbon output and therefore tackle or mitigate some of the worst impacts of climate change. 27% of people said, no, we are committed to net zero and we should stay committed to net zero. The thing that's most interesting for me, I think, is that 29% of people polled said they didn't know. And fundamentally, for me, I think that means that those people don't yet know enough about the situation. Maybe they don't know what net zero is. Maybe they don't know what the impact of changing those commitments or kicking them down the line might be. So there's a huge piece of education, information sharing between reliable sources of information, and that has to be the kind of crucial detail, reliable, factually accurate sources of information, and people, because I think, honestly, if people were presented with all the facts and then had information shared that helped them make up their mind, they would go, net zero is a no-brainer. Chris Skidmore, who's the Energy Secretary, is quoted as saying, net zero will make people warmer and richer, not colder and poorer. And I think he's absolutely right. There's a lot of talk about how this is terrible, how it's undermining energy security, how it's going to rise up the cost of living, how people can't afford these green taxes because they just need to heat their homes. Fundamentally, if you insulate your home, if we generate more renewable energy, if we invest in these technologies, the future is brighter for all of us.
Okay, really interesting to see if the debate does take off, and there is more said about it. Pete, take us to the Mail on Sunday next. This is vegan cats.
It's bizarre. Owners of cats now want their cats to be vegans. One lady said, it doesn't chase the rats anymore. Well, I'm sorry, it's wrong, it's cruel, it's not natural, and the vets say if a cat doesn't have meat, or any animals don't have meat, it's very, very dangerous to them. Their digestive system can't take it. You are supposed to be animal lovers. I'm sorry, I've never heard of it. My cats are vegan. Oh, get a life, you sad people.
Quick word from you, Marianne. I don't know how long we've got. We've got time for Marianne to have a quick comment on this. We've got 30 seconds. Any thoughts on this, Marianne?
Do you know what? I totally agree with you, Pete. If you want a cat, get a cat, feed it meat. I know. If you don't want a cat, get a guinea pig.
Do you know what? I think we're going to stop there. It's a rare moment of agreement. You're both smiling. Let's wrap it all up. Really lovely to see you both this morning. Pete and Marianne, thanks so much for your company and taking us through the papers. See you again soon. Thank you. Do stay with us. All the top stories coming up next on Sky News Breakfast.